What's going on, everyone? It's Justin here, and today I have my review of the brand new MacBook Pro with M3 processor. So just about 10 months after the M2 MacBook Pro came out, Apple has released an update at their Halloween event that I was actually on site for in New York, and it was kind of a surprise event. Yes, we were expecting new MacBooks, but this soon to have new processors in an already very powerful computer was interesting. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the updates and most importantly, whether it is worth it if you're coming from a last generation MacBook Pro or even a generation before that. Because over the years, Apple Silicon has proven to be extremely powerful and efficient, and I've had amazing performance since switching from the first generation of the Apple Silicon computers. Whether it is the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro to the Mac Studio as my daily workhorse computer, I've really enjoyed my experience with the MacBook line specifically, and I've really seen the updates come a lot faster with improvements to each generation more than ever before. So at a glance, what are some of the updates in this latest generation MacBook Pro? First off, the elephant in the room is the color. I know the color is relatively minor and not a specific reason to go ahead and update, but this space black looks incredible. It really is that perfect happy medium, and I absolutely love it. And from the space gray that we saw for many years and loved, as well as going back to silver for a little bit on my end, to jumping to the midnight, I really liked the matte black scheme of the MacBook Pro, but specifically the space black is just right in the middle. Not only is it not too dark, but at the same time it is darker than space gray, but there's also a special anodization that makes it fingerprint resistant more than ever before. And after a couple months with this computer, you can see that it has stayed relatively clean, but most importantly, it is also very easy to clean, and I couldn't say the same about Midnight. After a few weeks of using the Midnight Black computers, I ended up switching over to a Silver or a Starlight, but this looks incredible. Front and back, you can see that under different aspects of light, it just has like a specific gradient to it. And I've tried a lot of computers that have gone with that matte black color scheme, and it's amazing when it is brand new, but over time, it just becomes a total mess. And you can see that this computer stays very clean. Other than that though, from a hardware standpoint, the computer is essentially the same. The MacBook Pro has had a redesign for a couple years, and I really think they have hit it perfectly. You have your Thunderbolt ports on both sides, you have the MagSafe charger making its return, of course, the SD card slot, and these are all things that people are really happy to see in the MacBook after a few years of trying to be thinner and lighter. The edges also have a really good balance of sharpened and round edge, and the ventilation has also been sorted out with, once again, that happy medium of Apple's efficient processors being this year a 3nm architecture, but through the fan and design that has all been integrated in this unibody design. The MacBook Pro model that I've stuck to over the past few years though has been the 14-inch model. I think it's a perfect screen size because it is pretty much the same body size as a 13-inch, but thanks to the thinner bezels, you have the 14-inch and the 16-inch model, which is the same form factor as a 13-inch and 15-inch. I just find the 14-inch is really nice where you can appreciate the portable power, but if you're using it as your main computer, then I would say the 16-inch makes a lot of sense. But I've seen most of my team actually prefer the 14-inch model because it is just easier to put in your backpack and carry around. It is relatively light, but with all of the power that you're able to have, it really just makes you think, like, I mean, the MacBook lineup has really come a long way, and we're gonna talk a lot about the processors themselves. Another change is in the display. You have a bit more brightness with a sustained brightness at SDR of up to 600 nits compared to 500 nits, which is about a 20% improvement, which is not really a reason to go ahead and upgrade to the newest computer, but it is welcome. And in HDR, you have 1000 nits sustained and up to 1600 nits of peak brightness, and these displays look incredible. I mean, it is the Super Retina XDR display. Colors are amazing, the sharpness and everything is there, and it has a PPI of about 254. As someone who video edits primarily, whether it is color grading in DaVinci Resolve or editing video in Final Cut Pro 10, I also edit all my photos in Lightroom, and so the display on Apple computers has always been that accurate and sharp representation that is good for multimedia but also for creative work, and that is super important. Especially because I transitioned my workflow between the studio display and the XDR displays and the MacBook. Having that consistency of the Apple color space is part of the reason why I've stuck to the entire ecosystem. And I want to give a huge thanks to the sponsor of this video, 3M, and the 3M Bright Screen Privacy Filter. This is a new product that increases your screen brightness by 25% when compared to other standard black privacy screens, all thanks to 3M's nano louver technology. The 3M bright screen privacy filters are among the thinnest privacy filters available from 3M, and with it being so subtle and unnoticeable as a user, it makes it a lot more likely that employees will actually use it and keep company information safe. I know a lot of people in sales and marketing that have sensitive information on their products, so for them, something like this is super important. So it really is an ultimate privacy device that ensures that you're compliant with privacy policies of certain corporate jobs and ensure that people around you aren't seeing sensitive and confidential company information that is on screen. Most importantly, as a user, you're not going to notice it because it is so seamless. So if you guys want to go and check it out for yourself, I'm going to drop a link to the 3M Bright Screen Privacy Filter down in the description section below, and a huge thanks to them again for sponsoring this video. So aside from the hardware aspects of having a beautiful space black body, which we need to stop and appreciate, the most important change in this year's MacBook, and pretty much every generation of MacBook for at least the next few years, is going to be in the chipset. This computer is the M3 MacBook Pro, and it features options of the M3, the M3 Pro, and the M3 Max. And breaking that down in the Apple lineup can sometimes be a little bit confusing because this year, the M3 MacBook is available in the new body design. Before, the base processor was on the old body, but I think the new MacBook Pro design is miles better, and this year you can get that in the base model. The M3 Pro and the M3 Max is what we're really going to talk about though, and this right here is the M3 Max, but I have also had a chance to learn about the M3 Pro as well, and essentially the short story is the M3 Pro is pretty much just as powerful as the previous generation M2 Max, and you're going to see that across the board for the next few years. The maximum processor from the previous generation is going to match the performance of the M3 Pro, or what is considered the middle processor in the lineup. When it comes to single core performance, this MacBook is also vastly improved. And if you're going with the M3 Pro model, you'll have the balance of the 12-core CPU with 6 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores, compared to the 12-core CPU of the M2 Pro, which had 8 performance and 4 efficiency. It also features an 18-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, and a 150 gigabit per second memory bandwidth with the 3nm architecture. And when it comes to like everyday tasks, I would say that every single MacBook that I've had since that first generation Apple Silicon has been relatively consistent, but over the years it has been refined. And I think if you're running a lot of tasks at once, especially just everyday tasks such as web browsing and mail, you might notice some slight improvements, and that is thanks to the single core jumps, and that reflects in the benchmarks as well. When it comes to the M3 Max though, it features up to a 16-core CPU with 12 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, and up to a 40-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, and 400 gigabytes a second of memory bandwidth, and you can now spec this computer all the way up to 128 gigabytes of unified memory. Before, that was maxed out at 96 gigabytes, which was plenty, but I've noticed that in this year's M3 Max, with 64 gigabytes of unified memory, it actually outperforms my 96 gigabyte M2 Max MacBook Pro, which was the highest spec from last year. The GPU in this generation made large improvements though, because it now has dynamic caching and hardware accelerated ray tracing, and these are similar optimizations that we've seen when it comes to Pro video on previous generations, where, for example, it has specific support that enhances the performance of programs such as Final Cut Pro. And I definitely noticed that, especially in the past couple years, as these CPUs have been optimized to harmonize with Apple's very own software. So when it comes to working in formats such as ProRes, I've really been able to enjoy the workflow, and I found that in just the past few years, our video editing has been improved a ton. But what does this mean when it comes to real-world performance? And to be totally honest, when I had the previous generation maxed out MacBook with an M2 processor, if I wasn't a tech reviewer and checking out the latest and greatest products, I really wouldn't have jumped to the newest generation. I love the space black, I love the little improvements here and there as someone who loves tech in general and is always looking for a little bit more performance, but the reality is the M2 Max computer was already more than enough performance than I needed. It was super fast, I never ran into any hiccups, and I found that when it came to editing batch video in sets of hundreds of clips and exporting them out, it was already more than what I needed. And jumping to this newest generation does have its improvements, but I think the real improvements are for people who are going with the M3 Pro and maybe not speccing out the computer to the absolute max, versus someone who already had the maxed out previous generation and is looking to jump even further. That isn't because the improvements are less than incremental, it really is just because the previous generation was already fast enough, and Apple has done an amazing job in the integration of their chipsets along with updated hardware to go along with it now that they control the entire process of building the computer. The internal storage is still super fast. It starts with a base of 512 gigabytes and it goes all the way up to 8 terabytes. And when it comes to the thermals, I never really noticed the fans kick on that heavily. It only really comes on when I'm doing batch exports in DaVinci Resolve and transcoding large amounts of footage at the same time. The computer generally runs pretty quiet, and when the fans do come on, I find that the thermals of the computer are still relatively well controlled. But the one thing that hasn't really seen any major jumps is the battery life. Over the years, we see the processors become more efficient, but that is just to keep up with the amount of power that it is able to push out with more performance cores compared to efficiency cores. But the battery life is still something that if you're a pro user, it will generally get you through about 4 to 5 hours of usage. But the full day usage is really down to basic tasks such as playing video, maybe some web browsing, and some emails. And it's not to say that the battery life is bad, but I do think it can still be better at times. I find that it is just enough, but nothing crazy. But over the years, I do hope that the battery life continues to improve because, yeah, the power is definitely there, and I'm finding that I don't really need the updates more than every 2 years, just when it comes down to the chipset. So generally speaking, it is a very incremental update. I do like the fact that this space black color is one that I think they're gonna go with around the rest of the lineup for the next few years because it is a lot better than Midnight. And I mean, Apple's chipset just continues to get faster and faster than the consumers can even keep up with. And that is why the event was called Scary Fast. The graphics performance on this MacBook really is impressive, but it really comes down to, do you need that power or not? So the consensus is, if you have an M1 Pro or an M1 Max computer, definitely think about upgrading. If you're someone who relies on your computer for everyday work, you will notice the improvements. It is a lot better. But if you're coming from last year's computer, obviously there's no real reason to upgrade unless, again, you want those incremental upgrades every year and you want to upgrade that unified memory straight to 128 gigabytes from the 96. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to go ahead and drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.